Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery, a mental health and addiction recovery podcast. Hosted by Scott H. Silverman and Fred Carroll. It's okay to not be okay. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery, a mental health and addiction recovery podcast. I am Fred Carroll, and that man up there is life coach, family navigator, Scott H. Silverman. How are you, Scott?
I'm well, Fred. How are you, brother?
Good. So today we have a guest. I call her Rachel Olivia Kove. I don't know if she goes by the Olivia, but her brother told me she is his rock. So the R-O-K is Rachel Olivia Kove. She is the CEO and co-owner of Transformational Solutions, a certified recovery coach, and she happens to be the twin sister of my past guest, actor Jesse Kove, who spoke glowingly of her and his nephew and his brother-in-law, I should mention. And as a sidebar, her father is Martin Kove, who is John Kreese of Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid, among many other characters in his long career. So welcome to Ending the Stigma, Rachel.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored to be with you guys. I absolutely love getting to know anybody who is ending these stigmas, and I love open discussion. So I'm just so excited to be on here, and thank you so much for having me on here.
Yeah, no problem. I was very honored to have your brother on my show, and he was an excellent guest. He's just a cool, laid back guy, and he spoke so great of you. And once I started doing research on him, I went down a Rachel rabbit hole because I connected to you, and because I have this other podcast with Scott about mental health. I said, oh, I'm going to go through the whole Kove family, and eventually Martin's going to come on.
Yeah.
I might even create Dancing with the Stars too, just to get him.
Oh my God. Did you watch it?
I did. I watched, well, the 2 weeks. He was on 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, he was on 2 weeks.
Listen, he's 74 years old. He's doing great.
I dare anybody to go on that show and do what he did at 70. I think he's 74, turning 75. That's just so inspiring for me. So I even whether it was 2 weeks or 1 week or 1 minute, I'm just so impressed that he was able to do any of that.
Yeah, he's very impressive. So tell us about Transformational Solutions and the path that got you to where you are today.
When I was 16 years old, I went to a residential treatment facility for alcohol abuse. I've been in recovery myself for 14 years, going on 15 years. I was going to die. I mean, just to put it very simply, I was going to die from the time I was 13 years old. I was severely depressed. By the time I was 12, I had suicidal ideations. And I wanted the pain to end. And I didn't know there was any other solutions other than wanting the pain to end. And the only way at that moment I knew how, which I thought maybe I should just end my life. And then I was introduced to alcohol, and that numbed the pain for me for 2.5 years. And so when I was, so from 16 to 21, I was in 12-step programs, and those were very helpful for me at the time. And I needed a job. And I thought, well, what do I like to do? I love to help people. I have a story that's relatable. I loved kind of doing the mentor thing and 12-step program. So what can I do? So I started working in sober livings. That was when I was 20. So from the time I was 20 to I'm about to be 31 now, I ran sober living facilities. I went to school for my KDAC. What else did I do? I started to work in recovery coaching, life coaching with people from, people who suffer with substance abuse, codependency, sex addiction, porn addiction, alcohol abuse, cutting, self-harm, all these various different addictions. And for me, I definitely have seen a common theme with everybody. But 4 years ago, I started Transformational Solutions with Seth Hall, who actually, he's not my husband anymore. We are business partners still, but we are actually divorced. But we still run our company together. We're still best friends, raising our son together. And he has a very inspiring story as well. He was a heroin addict for 10 years, homeless. And he got sober and we just both have such a passion for helping people turn their lives around, helping families connect again, helping people go from a place of misery to a place of self-fulfillment and self-actualization, and where they feel like their life is worth living. So we started Transformational Solutions 4 years ago. I'm very long-winded, by the way, just to warn you.
Okay, we can
I don't know
handle
how to give short answers. I've really tried in my life, but I just am not very good at it. So we started Transformational Solutions. It actually was originally called Home Care Recovery Solutions. I was pregnant when I started our company, and we had this idea, and we just went after it. And we're both so passionate about what we do. I wanted to provide solutions for any human being that's struggling, because I really don't believe that one shoe fits all. I really don't believe that one thing is meant to help every single person. I believe everyone is their own individual person with different stories, different childhoods, and everyone deserves different types of solutions. So we provide coaching, we work with therapists, we do case management, we do couples coaching, we do family coaching. It's going really, really well. We're developing programs online. We wrote a workbook called the Mountain Method, which is a goal-oriented workbook. We run groups all around Los Angeles at outpatient facilities. So there's my answer.
Oh, good. Can you relate to any of that, Scott?
Well, actually, when you think about it, Fred, from what little you know about me and the books I've written, she's telling my story, and it's what I do. I mean, I wake up every day hoping I'll get a strange phone number in my phone, because that to me is going to be somebody I don't know that more than likely I can help. And it's interesting, today, for the first time ever this morning, I got this, when you get an unknown caller, it says unknown. And when I do media work, and I'm a subject matter expert, when I do interviews, I always give out my phone number. So I get calls from all over the place. This morning, it came up anonymous, and I've never seen that before on the phone. It turned out to be a guy that was reporting a homeless guy that worked near our office, that he wanted to see if I used to work with a homeless agency for 18 years. So I've been around helping others for a long time, and I love it as well as you do. And it's nice to hear others who speak of I think you said you were obsessed earlier with doing this. So just keep an eye on that, practice self-care, because you know what obsessions will get us to. So, and I've been in long-term recovery for a while, and I like you, I actually run a treatment center now, and I opened it 8 years ago because I was tired of going to funerals from people in my own home group. It's like, why in God's name did, and listen, and then watching with COVID, watching what's happening with people with relapses. And we were just talking before we started, the UNC University has shut down. I don't know if it's for today or for a period of time, because they've evidently been experiencing a huge amount of suicides. And these are, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24-year-olds. These are young people. And I, as a subject matter expert, I talk a lot about the opioid crisis, and my new book's called The Opioid Epidemic. So I'm fully immersed in all of the things that are going on. So it's nice to think of somebody as a kindred spirit who's, sounds like when you wake up in the morning, you're just, working your way through trying to find ways to help save lives, and reducing the stigma is how Fred and I got together. Because if we don't talk about this, we're not going to talk about this. I mean, 240 people die every day right now behind opioids, 240 every single day in this country. And that's a plane crash. And, you don't hear about it on the news when something really catastrophic happens, like a mayor or congressperson or, legislative leader loses a family member. Then it makes the news cycle. And I was talking to an AG in Florida a couple of months ago, and he's a subject matter expert for CNN. And I was a CNN hero back in 2008. And I asked, hey, can you make an introduction? He says, look, buddy, if your name isn't Biden, COVID, or Trump, you're not going to get national exposure right now. So anyway, so Rachel, tell us, what was the pivot point for you after going through your own experience when you decided, because I know the saying, you can't keep it if you don't give it away, but was there an aha moment for you somewhere in your recovery path and you said, okay, you know what, I really need to do this?
In 14 years, I've had probably 3,375 aha moments. I'm so grateful for that. I think the first aha moment I had that made me take my life seriously was, and I'm a very raw, transparent person. I'm sorry if this subject matter brings up anything difficult for people to feel. But I was told by a rehab counselor, if you don't stop doing what you're doing, you're going to become a prostitute on Hollywood Boulevard. And it was the first time I was scared of where I could go with my alcoholism. And I wanted to live. I mean, the thing is that I don't think people understand. It's like, I wanted to live. I just didn't know how to live with the pain I had. If I had better solutions to transmute, transcend, work through the pain, I wouldn't have had to turn to alcohol. And, when I got sober from alcohol, I developed many other compulsive behavioral addictions. It's very common. So I think I love podcasts right now because, one, it's something for us all to listen to, but I think shame is such an epidemic. The reason why we have to have these conversations is to eliminate shame, is that shame hides in the shadows. And that's like at the core of addiction. So we have to talk about these things so that people can go, oh my God, like I'm not the only one. I don't have to live in isolation. I don't have to feel like I have to die just because I'm born wrong because I'm the only one suffering like this.
Right. So I'm going to push you a little bit. Is that okay? Because you said in a good way, but tell me, and you don't have to answer this question, but you mentioned, I thought I heard you say that you were, and I'm going to use my words, you anesthetized yourself because of things that were going on. Is there something you can point to? Because, it's interesting when I do interventions and I talk with families, they're like, well, I don't understand, how is it possible that my daughter, wants to try to kill herself every day? And why does she hang out with friends who give her things that could kill her? What is wrong with people? Why does that happen? So from your perspective and your experience, if it's okay, what was it that, what was changing in such a big way, or what was causing you that kind of pain that you needed to anesthetize yourself? I mean, for me, it was like, I had a zero attention span. I had ADHD. I too acted out and tried to take my own life when I was 30. And obviously that was a big tipping point for me. But what was it for you? Was it a series of things? Was it an event that took place, something you can point to?
I mean, it's a complex question with a complex answer. And I can't give you a specific one thing.
Okay.
I know that from the time I was 7 years old, I was experiencing massive amounts of self-consciousness. I had experienced bullying in my school. I had experienced rejection from my peers. There was not a lot of conversation in schools or in your peer group about emotions, about uncomfortable feelings, about uncomfortable thoughts. There just wasn't safe places really much in the world, because this conversation wasn't common back then, to really open up about these things. I think these conversations, they need to be talking about depression, anxiety, so like in elementary school. They need to be talking about uncomfortable feelings and what sadness and anger and grief is when we're children. I teach my son he's 4 years old and he has more emotional intelligence than most adults I've spoken to. I'm not being rude or anything. I consciously parent him so that he doesn't feel confused about who he is as a human and what he's feeling, so that if he ever got to a point where he was feeling pain or he was feeling alone, he has the language to come to his parents and talk about it.
Right.
My dad and my mom grew up in a time where this wasn't talked about at all.
Right. Yeah, we talk about that often. Do you think, Scott and I talk about sometimes, and you could actually answer this from a more personal, being the child of somebody that's famous, we often talk that these people that are famous should start using their platform of fame to help our causes of stigma, and they don't do it enough. Do you agree with that? And do you see it changing?
I do see it changing. I think, again, social media has helped in that regard. I think that people are becoming more comfortable being human. I think times are changing in Hollywood. I think voices are being heard more. I think it's dangerous to go from one. I think it's dangerous to be an extremist. I think people need to learn how to have difficult conversations, how to maybe disagree, how to maybe hear difficult things. I think that people need to learn and be taught how to take responsibility for maybe where they've caused harm. You know, being the daughter of a famous person is a very interesting experience. And I think I've a lot of friends who grew up in a similar way. And it's like you get to meet people that the whole world idolizes and makes godlike. And they are no different. They might have different experience out in the public where they're maybe mobbed or treated differently, because there's no doubt they're treated differently. But they are human. They have human feelings. They go through depression, sadness, anger. They go to the bathroom. They have insecurities. They have self-esteem issues. They want love. They want attention. They want to be accepted. We all have these needs. They're no different.
Right. And do you feel shows like Cobra Kai can, I hate this, I don't want to even use Cobra Kai because that's an unfair question. It just shows, do you think the media itself causes mental health issues? Are we teaching a bad example through TV? Through certain things, absolutely. I think anything that has the ability to influence people on a mass level can cause healing or destruction. The reason I love Cobra Kai is because it does address many different topics for the older generation that came from Karate Kid to the younger generation who are the younger kids on the show. I've worked with so many clients. Bullying goes back to the beginning of time. This idea of power and control, and how do we come together and annihilating people for different opinions goes back to forever. Right.
And the reason I really like the show is because it really focuses on bullying. And that is a huge passion of mine. It's something my dad is a huge advocate for. He goes to schools and talks about bullying, because the impact bullying has on people's mental and emotional health is what leads to suicide, is what leads to addiction, because often kids will go to school, be bullied, then they'll come home to a family that has no idea how to connect to their child. So they come home, especially men go through this more often than women. I see with the clients that I work with. Men are taught you're supposed to be weak. I'm sorry, you're supposed to not cry. You're never supposed to show emotions.
Well, that was kind of Freudian.
That was Freudian. I see this so much in men's groups that I run. The pressure that they feel to never show their vulnerability. So they come home and then their parents don't know how to have these difficult conversations, and they're left with no solution. Someone introduces them to drugs, releases dopamine in their brain, pleasure-seeking machine. They become dependent on it. It's a cycle that's really very sad.
Yep, it is. From a more scientific side of things, I was mentioning this to Scott before you came on. What is the effect that you know of, first of all, between your own child being the child of two addicts, at one recovered addicts, but are his chances now increased, and what's the connection between you and your brother as twins? Do you know any of those?
Yeah, of course I do. I think that is there science that could say if your parent's an alcoholic or an addict, you're going to be? I'm sure there is. I also believe it's how you're raised. I believe if you are in an environment, I think it's nature versus nurture. In most people that suffer with addiction, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, compulsive behaviors, There's this common theme that I've seen in thousands of individuals, whether they are ex-gang members, whether they went to prison, whether they grew up in Beverly Hills, whether they're celebrities. The common theme is, when I was a child, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel understood in some way. And when I was trying to be myself or talk about these things, I was shamed in some way, whether that be by a parent, a teacher, bullied in someone in school. So I shut my emotions down, I suppressed them, I didn't express them. And I was then introduced to something that made me feel better. I think it's how you raise your child. I really, really do. And then I think it's taking responsibility for maybe where you cause harm, or maybe you've hurt your child. I don't think I think if you're an addict or an alcoholic, I don't think your child is doomed. I think it's your responsibility to learn about generational trauma. I think it's your responsibility to look at your own childhood to see where you are projecting onto your child. Your child is just learning from their environment. That's what I believe. Yeah, and I'm okay being wrong. I'm okay with being wrong.
Listen, it's a great answer. It's a tough question to ask because it's so personal, but I have to ask these questions because you could answer them. You have the know-how, you understand the difficulty of the question and the answer, but we have, like you said before, if we're going to end these stigmas, we have to talk about these stigmas that are put on people. So it's the only way is to ask you the question. So I apologize if
I love talking about these things. I mean, I'm in the process of writing a book right now to talk about these things. Children need to learn how to communicate, and parents are the children's model for how to have relationships. So if I don't hide my feelings from my son. If I'm sad, I'll cry in front of my son and I'll explain to him, mommy is crying. This is what sadness looks like. And it passes. These feelings pass. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but this is how I deal with it. If I'm angry, I show my son how to work through anger in a positive, productive way, because he gets angry all the time. I don't know if you've ever met a toddler.
Yeah, I've had a few of them.
Oh my God, they go from anger to sadness to joy to they're like a demon and an angel in one body in 2 seconds.
Yes, but I heard he has a great grandfather. That's what I heard. I heard he's worshipped. He
has a wonderful he's actually raised by a tribe of grandparents, honestly. He has wonderful grandparents.
So what do you got, Scott? You got a question?
I just thinking as you're talking, parents, and parents need to listen. I talk a lot about, especially because the question I get asked a lot is, how do I talk to my child? What do I say? And most parents organically will go to fear and then take that fear and give a list to a child of what not to do. Because I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to make a list when I'd go out on a Friday night. Don't see this one, don't go there. And I go, Mom, okay, I'm 19 now. We can stop with the list, because when I get to the car, I tear them up anyway. So thanks for the list. And it only made her feel better. But I think listening is so important, and being able to have a conversation with a 4-year-old and what a 4-year-old knows today. I think you said your son is 4 years old, right?
Yeah.
A 4-year-old today, if they have access to an iPhone, and a lot of kids do, or iPad, they have the information highway and potentially a maturation trajectory of an 11, 12, 13-year-old. So that information comes. And then when they go to school, they start talking to others. It's interesting, we're talking about bullying. One of the things that I know about bullying is that when the bully acts out and then the victim receives the bullying, other people see both sides of that. They see the victim and they see the bully. And most people are, they kind of tribe oriented, if you will. They attach to one thing or another. So if they're scared, they're not going to go to the victim side. They may start to emulate what the bully does and do that because they think it's what should be done. And when it comes to peer pressure, we see it in schools. We see what's going on with, what's going on campuses. And now we're seeing people act out. It was a big shooting in Minnesota. I mean, you get upset with somebody now, you pull out a gun and you shoot people around. I mean, that is just unheard of. But in the US, we're just example setters of how that happens on a regular basis. So if you had a magic wand, Rachel,
yeah,
with all the things that you're learning, and don't stop, because the trajectory you're on, I think is going to really not only change lives, but, you know, I can't wait to meet your son when, you know, one day when he gets to a point, we'll get him on the podcast and go, what was it like with Rachel as your mom? Well,
Wild.
the first 6 years, and then she shifted, and then I shifted, and then all of a sudden the next 4 years, and now I only talk to her when my attorney's present, because that way we have someone who can help us communicate.
Yeah.
I said, well, what happened to your rabbi or your pastor? You know, because actually
Right.
I have a daughter who's a family law attorney, so it's kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
When we have conversations with the type of work that I do and the type of work she does. And my nonprofit I ran working with homeless were people coming out of jail and prison. So I've had a chance to cross all kinds of different lines of working with people. And now I work with professionals and first responders and doctors and lawyers and people who, you know, it doesn't matter what zip code you live in, to your point, you know, this disease, and I call it a disease, it's like diabetes. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, mom, I'd like a strong dose of alcoholism and some diabetes to spend the rest of my life trying to manage. Doesn't happen that way. Some of us get it, some of us don't.
Yeah. And I mean, there's two things you brought up that are just so important and personally meaningful for me. When I was in high school, not one person asked me if I was okay. Not one person, whether it be a teacher. I mean, it makes me emotional because I was suffering so much and I did not know how to ask for help. I really didn't, because somewhere along the line in my life, I learned that asking for help was weak. You know, you were talking earlier about media's, you know, the power of media and the mental health. Where do people learn how to be? Through music, but most often it's television shows and films. And for whatever reason, I just never learned that it was okay to just ask for help. And you said something else too. You said children, you know, human beings, we are tribal beings. We have to be around groups to survive. So in school, it's natural to have the proclivity to go and want to be with the group of people, right? It's natural to want to avoid the people that are by themselves because, you know, when we were fighting for our lives out in the wild, right? Like we needed a group of people to help us against the huge predator in the jungle who was the tiger. So that part of our brains has never gone away. I think the magical wand is, gosh, someone asked me that recently. I still don't even know if I have, because I don't think it's a one thing. I think it's opening the lines of communication. I actually really think in most of the groups that oh no, did I go away? Sorry, someone called me.
It's okay.
In most of the groups that I run, I love groups. I've done a lot of individual work with people, but groups is where I just thrive because I hear and see so many different stories, and I see the healing that happens with a group of people because shame is eliminated in a group when other people are like, oh my God, I went through that too. I thought I was the only one. It's opening up the lines of communication. It's teaching people how to communicate and taking away toxic shame. You know, this isn't about this isn't about shaming the bully either, because the bully became a bully because they are bullied themselves. And the only way they know how to get a sense of power back is by taking their rage and anger out on this person in front of them because they were not taught how to work through their own anger.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Do you see the benefit in like a Ted Lasso? Because I got to tell you, the show Ted Lasso has changed the way I act as a human. I am so affected by this show, even though it's comedy and it has so many emotions tied into it, but I am becoming Ted Lasso. I feel his character is changing people watching it.
And that's the power of a show. That's how much a show has influence on people. And I love that. That's brilliant acting for you. And by the way, I played soccer till I was 21 years old. So soccer is like the love of one of the 5,000 loves of my life. But, you know, yes, he's a different type of, you know, that scene. That scene where you see one of the lead characters being yelled at by his dad.
Yes.
and you were able to connect. Oh my God. Like, it was hard to watch, right?
Have you watched it yet, Scott? Have you watched Ted Lasso?
No, my buddy's been talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we just started I'd rather watch other goofy things, but no, but I've heard it's ranked and it's rated and
brilliant,
really, really high up there. So
I highly recommend it to you.
Well, if you're watching something that's changing the way you think and believe, Fred, I will.
Yes.
I'm going to leave now and I'm just going to start watching it. So you finish with Rachel and I'll let you know how I feel.
Because
I'll binge watch it tomorrow at Friday and get it done because I've heard some wonderful things about it.
But the good thing, you'll love it. You'll absolutely love it from your mental health perspective, because they touch on everything right down to they get to the edge of suicide, because I think some of the anxious moments of he's dealing with anxieties and stuff. I'm sure there's an ideology in there somewhere in the character's mind, but they deal with the comedy. It's about being a good person. That's what it's teaching me, is the good will beat the bad if you're good enough all the time. Because he is gold at every moment of his life, from his divorce all the way down to his future, to his bosses, to everyone. He treats everybody as a human. And I see the difference, the reaction. And it's written fantastically, even though it beat Cobra Kai in the Emmy Awards. We won't talk about that. Your brother did, but we won't. But before we end this show, because unfortunately I actually have to go to work because it's on the East Coast and it's almost 7 p.m. and I go to work at 8 p.m. But
totally good.
Before we end this, a lot of people don't listen to my other show from this show because it's two different shows. So they won't hear what I told your brother, but I wanted to tell you the effect that your father had on my life. And I will tell you this, I was 14 years old when I kissed my first girl, and it was at the Karate Kid movie. Her name was Leslie, and she's aware of this. She's still a friend of mine today. I told her all about this. And as Daniel went into the crane move, I heard your father say, "Sweep the leg." But I was looking at the girl. The girl was looking at the screen. What I heard your father say was, "Go for it." And that's what I did. I went for it and I kissed my first girl while your father gave me direction. So that's the moment I've had with Martin Kove.
That's so sweet. I can't tell you how many people come up to me and tell me stories like that. Or I had a man recently come up to me and say, your Karate Kid was the first movie I ever saw in theaters with my father, so I'm never going to forget it. I don't know. It's one of those films that I wasn't alive when it came out, but it's one of those films that it just really made a huge impact. I mean, again, I'm a huge movie buff. I've studied acting myself. I'm an aspiring actress myself. And I think that's what film has the power to do, has the power to leave huge impacts on people.
So being an aspiring actress, even though this is away from the genre of the show, because I asked your brother this same question, was with all the positive reasons with all the access you have due to who your father is, what are some of the negatives to because your father is who he is? From an acting standpoint, getting into acting.
It's really funny you bring that up. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. I think there's this assumption of how I grew up. That's hard to deal with sometimes. I think people think that, if you're a dad, or if you have a parent that's successful in a certain industry, you automatically have a shoe in. That's not my experience. And I also personally, I want to work for what I want to work. If I become a successful actress, I want to know that I earned it. I want to know that it's not just because I have a father who's, made a career of this.
If you heard, there's no doubt that you're twins, because if you heard your brother's answer next to your answer, it would just be a female voice and a male voice saying the same answer, because your brother was very adamant in his hard work and getting there on his own. Even though there are many benefits to being Martin Kove's child, there's also a lot of, he talked about somebody like Weston, his good friend Weston Cage Coppola, because I had mentioned that sounds like a tough name to get a good table at a restaurant, because obviously it's not. but there is toughness that goes with it. When your father's Nicolas Cage and your grandfather's Francis Ford Coppola and all these connections, it's not as easy as it sounds. There's a lot of, like your brother mentioned, I technically met your father before you. You know, I knew you, and that's weird. It's weird to him that I knew your father before you knew him. And
Yeah.
it's just a weird thing.
Yeah, I think, and you know, and Weston is one of the best humans on the planet. You know, I was, you know, he's like a brother to me too. I think it's just recognizing that we're all human. We all have individual stories. Some people might grow up in families where their parent might be famous or not. But my dad worked really, really hard to be where he's at today. And he very much instilled in us that you have to work for what you want in your life. You have to work for what you want in your life. I mean, he's a man who grew up in New York in a family that there was no acting or anything like that, right? Yep. But he had this dream and he came out to Hollywood and he persevered. And, you know, growing up, it's not like, you know, he was where he is right now. He really had to work hard. So I think what people need to stop doing is stop assuming things, stop judging. It's natural for human beings to start judging. And I would say to become curious, just become curious in each other and each other's experiences.
See, that's a Ted Lasso line. That's a Ted Lasso line.
Is it?
You just remember when he's playing darts, he says, nobody ever asked me if I was curious. They never asked about my curiosity. And
probably the magical wand is probably curiosity. How to ask people compassionate, curious questions from your heart, not from your rational brain that needs to prove everyone wrong all the time to stay safe and secure in an identity that you're attached to, but from this open space of we're all different. Let me be curious of your story. Let me be vulnerable so that we can actually practice being vulnerable in our society again. I don't even know if it ever was allowed.
Well, before we end it, maybe you'll come on another time with us, and
please.
I'm
in the
so future.
Sorry we don't talk for 30 minutes.
That's okay. We're fine. We're fine. We'll talk forever too. Scott and I do this alone a lot, and we have no script. That's what I had told your agent. He had asked for some question. I said, we're unscripted. We kind of just go with it. We know Scott knows what he's talking about. I'm professional enough to carry it from a production side, and we care. That's all that you need. That's all you really need. So before we do go, I want to thank Rachel for joining us. And Scott, you want to give your phone number out to everybody?
I absolutely do. Thanks, Fred. And Rachel, that was great. Really nice to getting to know you. And, you know,
yes,
we're sitting in your living room and it feels like we're sitting in your living room, which is great. So by the way, anybody needs me, the holidays are coming, you know, please call or text 619-993-2738, 619-993-2738. Call or text me and know that there's always hope and help. And Fred, why don't you wrap us up with that special feeling that, you know, obviously after watching that show now, it should roll off your tongue.
Yeah.
We've been training Fred on this for over 2 years, and he's been through a lot of therapy, and he's going to get there.
This is my therapy. So if nobody, this is my therapy. So if nobody has told you they love you today, we love you. And that is the end of Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery. I hope you'll join us next week. And thank you again, Rachel Kove. It was an honor to meet you, and tell your father to get on one of my shows.
I will.
You have the control. Okay. You have the power, Rachel. You have the power. Thank you very much. Hang out there for a minute. Hang out there for a minute, Rachel.
Okay.